Hey guys, and welcome to our For the Life of the World, continuing the conversation devotion. This is on page 13 of your material. It's from the week 3 message outline, if we were doing that message series, and it's point number 4, which says, seeking God's righteousness through our work means we pursue justice and virtue in our work. So, if you remember in our last devotion, the point was seeking God's righteousness in our work runs along two main avenues. First, it means doing it as an offering. And then here, the second avenue of seeking God's righteousness at work relates to how our jobs interact with justice and virtue. This is an oversimplification, but we might say how our work, how our vocation, how the things we do, how they interact with doing right and doing good. Doing right and doing good. Doing what is good. Doing, again, an oversimplification, but doing what is right the right way. So the point they make here is, I'll read it verbatim. The second avenue of seeking God's righteousness at work relates to how our jobs interact with justice and virtue. Our business decisions should consider things like fairness, keeping our word, and adding value to the local economy. Our business decisions should not lead us to trample on the poor, which is a quotation of Amos 5, take a bribe, or turn aside to the needy, quotes of Amos 5:12. In these considerations, we also seek God's righteousness in our work. Now, it's no small coincidence. I've been wanting to see it. It was a 2019 movie produced and acted in by a guy named Mark Ruffalo called Dark Waters. And it's about a true story of a DuPont plant. Basically massively ruining the water of for many people in Parkersburg, West Virginia. And getting to the bottom of it, it took 20 years to litigate the thing. But getting to the bottom of it, they basically discovered DuPont, in making Teflon, had made a chain of 8 carbons. It's called C8 or something else. It had another nickname. And basically, it was directly linked to 6 major health problems. And here's the whole point. They were making profit. This is after paying for everything and everybody. They were making $1 billion a year profit on Teflon. $1 billion a year profit. And the waste from Teflon was literally killing people. Literally. Now, not saying you should go watch the movie. It's an interesting movie. I'm just using it as an illustration. It was a massive injustice. Now, I'll tell you what's crazy is in all the financial penalties put on them by the government and by civil litigation, they still hadn't paid $1 billion in penalties. It's still under $1 billion in penalties. In other words, you make Teflon for 40, 50 years and make $1 billion a year profit on it. And you don't even pay back 1 year's worth after doing all that damage. So it was a massive injustice was being done, and in that process, many injustices were done. Now, what was interesting is when the family started bringing suit, they were ostracized by many in their town because that DuPont plant was the largest and most profitable business in town. In other words, it was the best job. It was the highest paying job. And anyway, you can look it up. It's just I'm just using it for an illustration. And it's easy for us to think of these large corporations as perpetrating, massive injustice. But what about even a small business person where we just decide that we're gonna do stuff and we're gonna get a bunch of profit off of people just because we can. There has to be a fairness in our small dealings. There has to be a justness in our small dealings if we're even going to begin to recognize the unfairness in large dealings. In other words, it's easy to look out the window at the corporation off there on the horizon, but we do well to look in the mirror and say, are we involved in endeavors where we do the right thing the right way? Do we, are we unjust? Do we fail to consider how this is affecting people? Do we fail to consider how this is impacting the environment, which, we're all sharing the environment? Am I paying a fair wage? Am I asking a fair price? Am I not only caring for my customer, but my employee? Or if I'm the employee, do I not only care about my coworkers, but also the end product? Do I just want what I can get from my company, or is it in my mind to do the right thing the right way? And so the writer appeals to Amos chapter 5, and really, this is one of these times where, really need to read verses 1 through 17 because it's all one thought. But, I can't. So what I'm going to do is read. I'm going to start in verse 11 through verse 15. Therefore, because you trample on the poor, you exact taxes of grain from him, you have built houses of hewn stone, but you shall not dwell in them. You have planted pleasant vineyards, but you shall not drink their wine. For I know how many are your transgressions, and how great are your sins. You who afflict the righteous, who take a bribe, and turn aside the needy in the gate. Therefore, he who is prudent will keep silent in such a time, for it is an evil time. Seek good and not evil, that you may live. And so the Lord, the God of hosts, will be with you, as you have said. Hate evil and love good, and establish justice in the gate. It may be that the Lord, the God of hosts, will be gracious to the remnant of Joseph. So he's saying you're living in an evil age, and he's actually all the way back in verse 11, 10 and 11, or even before that, those who are leading are being accused of being part of the injustice, being part of the evil. They're living in these hewn houses. In other words, you're living in a big house, but you're over here, trampling on the poor with bad business. Whether that bad business is exorbitant taxation, or, where, the one person buys it cheap and sells it big just because they can. One of the things that ruined me, I'll never forget, we had some tobacco and we sold it for $3.16 a pound. And I just thought, wow, this is a great price. And I'll never forget that, because it was the first time, that was the highest I'd seen it go at that time. This was 40 years ago. And not too long after that, I was reading some random article, and I was just a teenager, and it said something like 10 cartons of cigarettes will be made from 1 pound of tobacco. And at the time, a carton of cigarettes was like $12, which is a joke now. And I'm like, wait a minute. So they're getting like $50, and so I said something to an adult, and I says, yeah, but they have to process that, package it, they have to market it and distribute it, and so it's a lot of people are getting paid after the farmer. And I'm like, yeah, I get that, but why does the farmer got to be the one that gets run over in the process? If everybody else is getting a fair wage, I happen to know farmers struggle to make it. And again, this is just an illustration, but you see what I'm saying? We're challenged as we live out our salvation for the life of the world to think about justice in our jobs, in our businesses, in our transactions. Are we trampling on anyone on our way to, living our life and doing our work? Are we trampling on the grace of God, the holiness of God, the truth of God? Are we trampling on the heart of God when we ignore the poor, take advantage of people? Do we think about justice and justness? Do we think about virtue and what is noble and what is good? Are those things on our mind as we pursue our labors? So if one thing is an offering to the Lord, well, let's make sure it's an offering, our work is an offering that is right before the Lord and right for the people around us. I see the time is flying. I'll give one more example. When you go into work, do you think about offering that work to the Lord and it being just to the company or people or whatever the movement you work for? Are you putting in a just day's labor when you ask for a just day's wage? That's a great question. So we need to think about justice and virtue in our labors. Thanks for listening, y'all. Peace.